somebody was talking about a garbage collector, which just didn't strike me as industrial strength, but was in some scripting language because that's what they implemented first. And I think that what we could do I think that there's something exciting to be done in the underlying infrastructure if we combine some of the type-safe assembler kinds of notions. If we generated to a type-safe assembler, and if we built an underlying, almost OS-like service for here's what objects and pointers are, and maybe some of the verification stuff, I don't know.
Actually, well, that's going to be somewhat problematic because, at least with some of the cases, certainly on the scripting into thing, you can't reasonably do verification of the assembly language. We can't have type-safe assembly language because I can have the type of an object change at runtime.
Yeah, well, the type-safe assembly has to be able to accommodate that. I mean, maybe I'm talking about very weak notions of type-safe.
That's possible.
Where the notion of a pointer, all I really care about is the notion of a pointer is understood by the assembly language.
Okay.
And maybe it's not.
I think in the end you're going to have variable notions of type safety, right?
Yeah, probably. But I mean, we have to figure that out. But I think that there probably is some lowest common denominator that everybody could build on top of. And it's less safe probably than either Java or CLR. But I think that I think we want to address two things. One is the scenarios, and two is how do we technically work together in this community in order to achieve those scenarios. Doug.
So here's a sad parable from my experiences of the past 20 years in the middleware community, which has faced this from a very different perspective. Right? There were random ad hoc protocols, and then there was DCE as a big unifier, and that wasn't good enough. And then there were all sorts of random ad hoc protocols, and then there was Corba as a big unifier. And then Microsoft said, well, we don't like Corba. And so there were all sorts of federation schemes that said, hey, let's live with diversity for a while. And that didn't work so well. And then, like, the Java people said, hey, we need better semantics. We can't live on top of Corba. We make RMI and all sorts of other things like that. And that led to an even worse mess, but a lot of money for the players in this, by the way, in all these, all these layers of glue and gook, which is why middleware is gooky. It's exactly this story. And the latest, version of this is people playing grand unification thoughts again, saying, well, let's just add all sorts of overhead and get it over with, and there's XML.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what the analog is exactly here, but it's going to be something similar.
Well,
and people have played out all the other options in the middleware community, and they never solve it. They just revisit it. And there's these phases of unify, federate, unify, federate.
Right, that's essentially part of the repeating theme that interop is important, and everyone's inventing the solution for interop, which is come to my language, come to my platform. But I want to point out something that seems to be changing. It's going to change over time, and it's something that tickled me from your slides. You say, I need to be able to call native code so that I can do all these great things that native code currently does, and I need to restrict it. It's a very elitist story, and everyone in the room has that built into their bloodstream because we're all VM implementers, and if you just let me do the right things for you, and I won't let you do the wrong things, all will be good. So that's the very, the issue though is that now, and you had the word evil on the screen too for evil C++. We don't want anyone calling out to evil C++. Well, that's currently the enemy because that's where the most code is, right? But the native equals foreign.
Yeah, the evil could have been.
Right, the evil in the future will be, native will become less native, as in C++, will become more foreign, as in someone else's managed runtime. And right now, we don't want you to go to native because it's evil native code, but in the future, are we not going to allow going to foreign because it's safe foreign code, right? Because it's going to be in the CLR, and they said, trust me, and we're over here in the Java world saying, well, we're trusted, and if they're trusted, shouldn't this not, it's not me who just, we're going to encourage this behavior where right now we're saying don't call out from your language because it's too crazy out there, but in the future it's maybe not that crazy because they're doing the right things and we're doing the right things. But in all cases it's interop that's driving these attempts to get out of where you are, not because where you are is unsafe or bad or anything, it's because someone else chose somewhere else to do what they're doing, and you need to talk to these guys. And so the elitist thing is going to have to drop, because the elitist thing says just use mine, and you have to say no, I have to enable mine for people who want to use mine, and I have to enable others, and calling others and trusting the others, except for the evil C++, which we're forced to acknowledge now is too evil to interrupt with. But maybe that's another big piece that has to be solved.
Okay, Ben, I think you have it.
So, yeah, I think, so I just have a perspective. So there's this famous paper by Peter Lynn in the next 700 programming languages, and he talks about sort of a core semantics and then building on top of that. I think in this case, we really need to think about how we structure these systems in a way that we can factor them. We can have sort of a core that's smaller, and we can build on top of those. And from that point of view, I think we can agree on what 90% probably of our community, because this is not an immature technology. This stuff has been around for 20, 30 years. I think most people can agree on what the 90% need, not the other 10%. So federation is necessary for that other 10%. But from a technical point of view, if you had a core that was well factored and modular, you could probably meet 90% of the needs with a single solution. So this is my perspective. We have to understand how to factor the systems. We have to think of in terms of a core that meets the 90% need, and then we have to think about the middleware. I think this issue about sort of what's in the core, what are the libraries, how do they play together? We need a solution in that space, and the only way to get there is to actually think in those terms and have proposals. Have people come to the table with something that's different than what we have now. I didn't hear a lot of proposals for how to do things differently. It was more about how do we take what we have and get it a little bit further, as opposed to what should things look like in 10 years. I'd like to see more of that. I mean, I really it's who's doing it? It's got to be academics. It's got to be research.
To be fair to Ian, I think Ian probably came
as
close as possible.
Yeah,
right?
there you go. Ian was definitely
Yeah.
much further out than a lot of the other discussions.
Yeah.
You're way out.
And I'm glad that you guys are catching up finally. The thing where I think that people need to look harder is on the whole bit of approved safe code. Because the one way you get rid of the elitism is you say, nobody's in the elite.